We can order it. Just technically, you don't know if just remind me about this week.
Right.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Murray City Municipal Council Committee of the Whole meeting. It is August 22nd, 2023. I'm Gary Brooksy, the chair of the council. All council members are present. Welcome, David. Remember, we are going to start with approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole, July 18, 2023 and August 1st, 2023. Are there any revisions or changes?
No.
All right, with that, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of July 18, 2023 and Committee of the Whole August 1st, 2023.
And second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes. Then we will move on to the first item on our discussion item on our agenda, discussion on the Murray City Municipal Justice Court. Jim Peters, Justice Court Administrator, Administrative Office of the Courts, will be presenting. Looks like we have Mr. Doug Hill as well.
Just want to introduce Jim. Jim has been our contact at the state level for our justice court. Of course, I want to also recognize Karen Dagos, who's here, who's our administrative court clerk at the Justice Court. And we've been talking a lot with Jim lately over the last few months because our judge, Paul Thompson, is aging out of the court system. They have a maximum age requirement for judges, and he'll be reaching that age next, I think it's May.
What age is that?
75, right?
That's what I'm saying.
So Jim has been asking us as a city, what do we want to do? There are a few options which he will discuss with you tonight as to how we want to move forward. And so we've been meeting with Jim, and he's been trying to understand what the city wants to do. Now, I can tell you that, and I don't want to speak, Mayor, for you, but the mayor does have an opinion on the direction that he would like to see the city go, and I'll let him talk about that when we review those various options. And right now it's an administrative decision for the mayor to decide what direction we want to go. But ultimately it becomes a legislative decision because you will eventually have to weigh in the process. And so we just thought you should understand the process, the various options are available, and you can share your opinions with the mayor tonight. And based on those opinions, he'll know how he wants to move forward. So with that, Jim.
Thank you, Doug. And ultimately, I'm here to get marching orders from all of you as to how you want us to proceed. Unlike other city hires, the Justice Court judge is something that the administrative office of the courts is heavily involved in. And I don't know if you caught the legislation that came through this last session, but it clarified that much more, that a justice court really is part of the state judiciary. That's something that we partner with cities and counties to help in the operation. But ultimately, the idea is that the Justice Court in Murray and the Justice Courts scattered throughout the state would look and feel and operate very much the same. So we, by statute, are involved in the recruiting process. And I've got a few slides that I've passed around that'll provide an overview as to how it works if you ultimately decide that you want to keep the court and replace the judge. But there are two other options that I'll just highlight briefly for you. Cities and counties that are frustrated with their judges often call me, not often, I shouldn't say that, but on occasion, they do call saying, how do we get rid of our judge? How do we close the court? And the answer is, well, it's complicated if there's a judge on the bench. But if there's a judge that's not on the bench and you're in between judges, then it's much simpler. So I did want to let you know that it is an option to dissolve the Justice Court. when Judge Thompson retires next May, and the court is without a judge, the city could decide that it didn't want to operate its own justice court. Cases that originate here in Murray could go to the county justice court by default. The complication there is, I want to let you know that at this point, Salt Lake County has provided notice that it wants to dissolve its justice court. Now, in order for them to do that, they have to get legislative approval, because the default after a county justice court is for those cases to be heard in the district court. So there's a fiscal impact. Legislature's got to weigh in on that and fund it. And I don't know. We haven't seen any resolution come forward from the county. Of course, it'd be a little early for that at this point. And if it does, I don't know if it'll pass. We haven't had something like this before, so we'll just see how it all goes. But dissolution would be an option for you. But another way that you could preserve a few options going forward, but not necessarily operate the justice court in the meantime, would be to do an interlocal agreement with the neighboring jurisdiction. So one example of that here in the valley is Cottonwood Heights doesn't operate a justice court. Holiday hears those cases. Mill Creek just did the same thing. Mill Creek doesn't operate a justice court and never did. And it's now working with Holiday to hear its justice court cases. Outside the valley, there's a lot of other examples. The Washington County Justice Court hears cases for St. George and 5 other municipalities down there. So that'd be an option. And one thing that's better about an interlocal agreement than dissolving altogether is that in all reality, if you were to dissolve the court, you wouldn't likely ever get it back. This isn't baked into statute, but one of the rules of thumb that the Judicial Council goes with on the need for a justice court, and the statute does require that an applicant demonstrate a need, is that there not be another justice court within 25 miles. And here in the valley, we've got 20 or whatever. So that might be a hard burden to meet, but I'm not saying it's impossible. But if you do an interlocal agreement with somebody, say that you interlocaled with Salt Lake County, then the advantage of that is Salt Lake County runs the justice court. You all still prosecute the cases that originate here. You contract for those services separately. But if you ever get to a point where you want to revert back to your own court, then you terminate the interlocal based on its terms. You demonstrate to the council that you're ready to operate your court again, and you've got it back. So it's as though the court never went away, it just went dormant. So that's an option as well. But what I assumed was that in all likelihood, you would want to keep the court and replace the judge. So that's what these slides will talk us through. But before we start on those, are there questions about those first 2 options?
When you say the council would make the decision to dissolve, that's this council, not some other council.
Yeah, and thanks for that. There's a judicial council.
Yeah.
That I work with that's going to ultimately approve or deny certain requests. It's the Murray City Council.
That would determine we want our court. Okay,
Yeah.
something. Just wanted to make sure.
But that'd have to be approved by the judicial council to show that you got everything that you need in order to operate within the.
Could you tell me why some of the cities in Salt Lake County are getting rid of their courts? Is there a reason? Is it finances or burden?
I think the reason Mill Creek, and I can only guess, honestly, but I think the reason Mill Creek's doing it is because they're worried that Salt Lake County, which had been hearing its cases, has petitioned to dissolve its court. Like, oh, well, then we need to figure out something else. Why Salt Lake County is doing it, I'm honestly not sure. I've been in my position for 6 years, and I know there was talk before then of dissolving the court, and I think honestly it depends on who's in office and how they view certain things. And you all will have to wrestle with the same decision. There's 2 ways to analyze the desire to have a court. And one is, well, of course, we want to provide a service to our citizens. And that's one way to look at it. And another way to look at it is, well, is it making us any money? Or is it costing us money? And the analysis becomes all dollars and cents. And so with Salt Lake County, it could have been either one of those or neither. I just don't know.
So what are they doing? If they dissolve their court, then
It gets approved, it goes in the district.
It goes,
Yeah.
where will their,
Well, the first thing is that they have to get legislative approval to do it. So they go to the session this year, or they could even go as late as next year because they had to give 2 years' notice. If the legislature approves it, then there will be a fiscal note that allows the district court to manage that increased workload.
interesting. We looked at this, how many years ago, Mayor? About 4?
5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah, and we decided that, because it's a service to our citizens, and it just didn't make sense to dissolve it at that time.
Mhm.
And, it was much more complicated then than it would be now, since we
Or
are
in between
judges.
judges. Yeah, exactly. And I'm here to support whatever you all decide to do. I don't want to, steer you one direction or the other. All the options are on the table, and there's a jurisdiction somewhere in the state that's gone with any one of them and been happy with it. There's probably others anywhere in the state that have opted for something and regretted it. But that's like I say, with the interlocal, you do have options going forward if you want to bring the court out of dormancy.
And with the interlocal, you're paying that other jurisdiction to hear your cases.
Yes, the Judicial Council doesn't get involved in the terms of that agreement. What we're doing there from a legal standpoint is basically saying, and let's just say it's Draper, just to have a crazy example. Draper's jurisdiction is limited to its city boundaries, just like Murray's is. And so what's happening legally, if Draper and Murray were to enter into an interlocal, is the Judicial Council is expanding the jurisdiction of Draper to hear Murray's cases. But in terms of how the revenue is split, how the expenses are shared, all of that, that's between Murray and Draper. So
This West Jordan also, they have their own court.
they do. Mhm.
It's kind of
Which-
what we had looked at
Yeah.
before.
Which we were approached by Mill
Last
Creek
year.
at one point before they went to Holiday. Is that what I understand? Yeah.
So, yeah, there's lots of conversations out there, and
Yeah.
some of them materialize and some of them don't. But then, of course, the third option is to keep the court and replace the judge. And we're coming up on September, and we're going to need a new judge on the bench in May, and that's 8 months away. And it's like, oh my gosh, we have all kinds of time, but we really don't. And I'll walk you through the timelines here, and you'll see how it all adds together to go, wow, we should get started. And there's pros and cons to getting on this right away versus holding off for a few reasons, but again, I'll let you all decide what makes sense to you. But that second slide on the first page just provides the overview, and you'll see how all these timelines add together. The first thing, obviously, we do once I get the green light is to advertise the vacancy, and that's something that we do together. The statute has recently changed this last session, and that's summarized in the bottom slide there on the first page. But there's all kinds of things that we need to work together on to get the word out. What we've done before the statute was changed was we would issue a press release for at least 15 days, and if we don't get at least 9 qualified applicants as a result of that, then we extend it for another 15 days. But in between the two advertisements, it takes a little while for the mail to trickle in and see what's going on. We're not an electronic process yet. We're working on becoming one. I don't know if it's worth waiting for that, but that's in the works right now. But so it's not just the 15 and the 15 days, it's the time in between to wait for the mail to come in. But so you can easily get to advertising the vacancy to where it's 30 to 45 days while the applications come in. At the same time, and I'll provide a little more detail on this in just a minute, but we're working on forming a nominating commission. So again, different than a typical hire for the city, the applications all come into the administrative office of the courts. We vet them to make sure they meet minimum qualifications. And we provide those then to a nominating commission that's comprised of 5 different people. And like I say, I'll go over that in a minute. So the nominating commission then has its first meeting, And that starts another timeline ticking. So from their first meeting to when they have to finish their work, they've got 45 days. You've got 45 and 45 and 45. They all add together pretty quickly to get us to 8 or 9 months. And it can go faster for sure, as I'll explain in just a second. Once the nominating commission has finished its work, it's going to narrow the pool of applicants down to a slate of 3 to 5 people. And they then will be published for public comment. So that'll all go out and people will weigh in on whether those applicants would be good as judges or not. If we get any negative comments back, that adds even more time to the process. Because then what we do is we go back to the applicant and say, oh, look what someone said about you. And they have an opportunity to respond.
Oh, wow.
And the comment and the response then go back to the nominating commission, and they have to decide if they're going to keep that person on the list or not.
And that has to be a formal like email or public comment to.
In writing.
In writing, okay.
Yeah.
To the city,
No,
Or to the commission.
To the commission.
Okay.
Through me, yeah.
okay.
So once we get through the public comment period, which is at least 10 days, but then maybe more depending on what comments come back, then this whole package goes to the mayor. And the mayor will get these 3 to 4 to 5 people and whatever due diligence he and his team want to conduct. They dig in, they interview, they research, they go observe these people in other courts, whatever they want to do in order to decide which one person they then want to recommend to you all. So the mayor has 30 days once he gets his applicant materials, and then he'll meet with you, and you all have 30 days to ratify his decision or say no. So ultimately, the final say rests with the city council here. But even after you've approved the person, if they haven't been on the bench before, and some of these judges have multiple jurisdictions, but if they're brand new to the bench, then they have to go through a new judge orientation, which in this case, we would try to get them into an April session, which is already a month sooner than maybe we were looking at for Judge Thompson's birthday. And after they get into the new judge orientation and pass our tests and successfully complete that, I then take their name to the Judicial Council, who certifies that person as a justice court judge. And as soon as that's done, they take the oath of office, they can get on the bench and start hearing cases. Swearing in, we're used to being at a little bit more ceremonial. Maybe they come to a city council meeting and they don the robe and they give a speech and there's cookies afterwards. That part isn't necessary for them to have the authority. They just need to sign off on an oath. But often, cities will do both. So we can work that out as we get closer to April. But that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And like I say, if you start from April and work backwards, then we probably ought to get going here in the next month or so.
Yeah.
So as you think about these different steps along the way, how, in your experience, how often has the city council not ratified the mayor's selection?
Not in my time.
Never.
Not in my 6 years. Before that, I guess there was a time when South Salt Lake's mayor and the council weren't getting along so well. I don't know if that's even still true. And I can't remember if it actually got in the way of their new judge.
Okay.
By the time this one recommendation gets to you, that person's been vetted up one side and down
Right.
the other. But again, the council itself, you all are entitled to your due diligence as well. This person that you're appointing as a judge will probably outlast all of us.
Right.
Right? Judge Thompson's been on the bench since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a decision it's big, and it's going to have a huge impact on the city. So
And typically, are your applicants existing judges that want to hit on the Murray City Court, or are they attorneys? Is that more typical what you see?
either.
Okay.
Prior to 2016, not even Salt Lake County's judges had to have law degrees. And that changed in 2016, and now this last year, it's changed statewide. Yeah, they did.
You can't be a judge.
I don't want to outlast. Dangerous.
So the new law took effect just on May 3rd. We're working through Grantsville right now. Utah County is going to put another judge on the bench. So for Grantsville, it's new, but for Utah County, the law degree would have been required anyway. And in Grantsville, we had 10 people apply. So
And a mix of judges and attorneys?
Mhm.
Okay. So is it kind of like you don't like the court you're in and so you want to go to a different court, it's closer to home? Like I'm trying to figure out why a judge would leave one post and want to go to another.
Well, not all these positions are full-time,
Okay.
right? So
Oh, okay. I see
the
what
judge
you're
in
saying.
Grantsville would be, working 10 hours a week, and maybe they're interested in more income right now. Once you become a judge, you're limited in the kind of law you can practice. You can't do any criminal law at all. So
For a city.
in order to make a living, some judges will combine courts to be full-time, and it benefits the smaller courts at the same time. Because if you're the judge in Alta, and that's the only court you have, you're hearing cases for maybe 20 minutes a month. And it's going to take years and years before you get really good at that. Whereas if you're hearing cases all day, every day, and you're doing Draper and then you're coming over and doing Murray, and of course that all has to be scheduled with the attorneys who are involved. But the cities benefit from the increased expertise, just like the judges benefit from the increased income. So.
And is our judge full-time? So he has enough caseload?
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't remember. I know she showed us the chart.
Yeah, and that would come up in the vetting process. If other judges were to apply, one of the first questions from the nominating commission, the mayor, all of you would be, wait a minute, you have other courts and you want ours too. How does that work? How are you going to do that? And some of them have really good answers. So, it's worth asking the question. We've got a judge, he serves courts in San Pete County, Paiute County, Sevier County, I think just the three, but he's got 13 courts. And he does a really good job with all of them. So but they're very small towns, and we've got to figure out how to schedule all these attorneys and get around them.
R2D2 has an opinion.
So Mayor, Doug said you have an opinion. Are you going to share that opinion with us?
Yeah, I don't mind doing that now. My opinion is to keep it. It's not a cash cow by any means. We're about 200,000 in the negative. Brenda, is that for the?
For the budget,
For the budget.
current year
So it's not
budget,
over.
yeah.
So it's not a moneymaker, it's a service. It's not, and we have a lot of employees. What's that?
We do everything on our own.
We
so
really
we
do.
should.
Discussion. Let me ask real quick. I'm familiar with GL's explained some of this vetting, and when we do that, I've always kind of included the council in a lot of stuff, so we don't have what you talked about, South Salt Lake. Is that something I can do? How do I ask this? So if we have vetted, you've done your vetting, I don't know. Rather than just throw it out of the council for confirmation, can I bring them in for this concept at all?
I'm actually not sure. And even if I were, I'm not sure it's our business to tell you how to run the city. So I'll check into that for you. I think it's a fantastic.
I've got an answer for me. Look at it. I should have looked over there.
You can govern how you govern.
Okay, then that would be the way I would do it.
That was what you told me to say before the meeting.
And so rather than surprise them and go, oh, I wonder if they're going to put it through, I'll know my answer well before.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like asking somebody in the interview before you know what they're going to say, right? That's a good way to go with this.
That's a pretty good analogy.
So,
I have a question
Yeah.
about the vetting process, or just seeing the comments that come in from the ones that are selected. Does that get shared with the council as well, or as the whole body, or it's only with the commission?
I believe that's just with the nominating commission.
Okay.
Check that as well.
I mean, I just thought I would ask.
my understanding, they do their own
And
vetting.
that nomination commission or committee is with the commission, correct?
Let me explain that. This bottom box talks about all the ways we have to notice up the position, but on the back page at the top, the statute explains what the nominating commission, how it comes together. So there's 3 positions outside the city,
Okay.
and those are already in place. So that helps us with the timeline. For Utah County, for example, that application period closed 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I'm still waiting on the COG appointment. So, I mean, some of this gets out of my hands, and until the commission's in place, we just can't move forward. But in Salt Lake County, we have somebody that's already been appointed by the county commission, and these are 4-year terms, so that's why they can be in place already. The COG's already appointed somebody, and the BAR's already appointed somebody. So those 3 are ready to go. The other 2 people on the nominating commission come from the city. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but ultimately you're going to want somebody who's, understands the court, understands what it takes to be a good judge, is good at vetting applicants and screening with questions and interviews.
So that really can be like the staff or the mayor, the county.
Yeah, there's restrictions on some of these others where they can't be elected officials. That's not true here, so you could even have the mayor as 1 or 2. And this one is a governing body appointment. So those 2 names will ultimately come from this group. And of course, you don't want it to be anybody who might be putting in or might be very closely related to somebody who's putting in, because that kind of defeats the process. So that's how that nominating commission is comprised. And I may have alluded to this earlier. They meet at least twice. The first time they get together, they're just pouring through the applications. And they're deciding in that meeting who they want to interview. And then the second time they get together, they conduct those interviews. And then there might be that third meeting if it's necessary to go through a negative comment. But they only have 45 days from their first meeting until we have to open it up for public comment. So we have to move quickly once things get started that way. And then this last slide here in the middle of the back page is just a summary of what I've mentioned already. After the nominating commission and the public comments gets handed off to the mayor, he's got 30 days. You have 30 days after that to ratify it. So if you're working together, really, you have 60 days. You may not need to take 60 days, but maybe you will. So it depends. And then you let us know what you've decided, and we put the judge through orientation if need be. And I take it to the Judicial Council. I'm assuming it will be looking at the 3rd or 4th Monday in April. So if we get everything teed up the way it needs to work. Oath of office and onto the bench. So.
Any other questions from the council?
No.
Okay, well, we appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. I guess you did want some direction. I mean, is there anyone who was not feeling like they wanted to move forward and keep the court and fill the court seat? No. Okay, so I think we're all aligned with you then.
What I'll do is prepare an announcement. And this box that we didn't go over, I mean, there's just all kinds of notice stuff. Between you and the AOC, we need to get it on the Utah Public Notice website. We need to get it on your website. The critical thing with that is that we've got to make sure the applications come into the AOC. Because if they come into Murray instead, they're not going to be part of the process. But I can work with Doug on that and we can get that going.
You mentioned on the committee that there might be some restrictions. Is there a restriction on the outgoing judge sitting on the committee picking his replacement? There is.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
curious.
good question. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to the second item of our discussion items, a discussion on an ordinance amending sections 3.14.060 and 3.14.070 of the Murray City Municipal Code relating to impact fee adjustments. GL Critchfield presenting.
You need to be the
Future judge.
So, impact fee that we currently talks about, that you challenge anything else, it brings to the city council. I don't recall when this was first drafted, I didn't draft this many years ago. I assume since that time, state law has come forward with a procedure that has to be administrative. So that appeal would be administrative, and we talked about this a month or so on the administrative side. The recommendation is going to be that we put in the ordinance, take out the city council and put in instead the finance director to be the one that decides on the appeal. That would be if when someone has an impact be imposed on their development and they disagree with it, then they have a chance to appeal that and at least currently Brenda.
I have a question, why the finance structure, not community? I guess,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I guess
Really,
it depends what the impact
great
is.
question, it's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think there's not necessarily a wrong answer,
Mhm.
but my sense would be that the finance director is aside and apart from the development
Mhm.
process.
Yeah.
Because your CED director can be pretty well involved with each developer, and that puts him in a little bit more difficult spot, I think, making that decision as well. But it's a really good question.
Go ahead, sorry,
What would be a reason that you would waive an impact fee?
anybody can ask.
Typically, you wouldn't, right? You wouldn't unless there's a specific exemption for how you ordinance. What this is going to deal with is we've already had a couple of inquiries on park impact. And I think what developers are looking at is the amount. And when the couple that I'm thinking of who have talked about possibly challenging it had their development applications close to going in before this impact fee came, and so it was kind of a surprise to them, the amount. So they may want to ask that it be reduced. There's some that may come in and say, we have done this as part of our development, we've built this trail, or we've done something, can that be partly, can that offset partly what's required?
What is the park impact fee? Does it depend on the size of the development?
Yeah, it does. It's,
The percentage,
I don't recall.
Okay.
is that like
It's-
13%?
It's all done in some sort of,
Sorry, that may be way
either
high.
measurement,
Okay.
and then multiplied by, I wanna say, square feet or something.
Okay,
That
sounds
sounds, yeah.
There's a 3 in there.
Yeah, I think we have a number there.
Could it be also, I'm just putting this out there, I'm
Sure.
sure you guys have already discussed all of this, but could it be a committee that the mayor appoints?
It could be, it's an administrative process, but what that typically means is someone within the city.
Has to manage it, yeah.
Yeah, so it would not be private people coming in as a committee. It
No.
could be a committee of employees, I
Mhm.
suppose, that would be a possibility. But really, to me, it's a matter of mathematics.
Mhm.
This is what we have as our standard impact fee. Tell us why that shouldn't apply.
Is it defined if something, a developer are under certain circumstances wants to have it waived, do we have that defined? Is that
We don't
cannot,
waive impact fees like that.
we cannot,
We don't.
okay,
This is that one-time charge to mitigate the impact of the development.
right. No, I-
And that is the ongoing way we pay for increased capacity and whatnot. So it would be unfair to those who already have paid and enjoying the infrastructure.
I'm just wondering why they were even questioning it.
Yeah, so one actually has, just real quickly, has built something they believe is a system improvement that we should, and they were thinking that we would go dollar for dollar. And that's not how we're looking at it. So it would be reduction, but not elimination of the impact fee.
That's why I was wondering if we have that defined.
That's defined. And so in terms of how we figure that out, yeah.
And what's the state code again that?
This is 11-36A dash 703.
I know that they had talked about it when I was up there, about changing some of the roles in terms of
Yeah,
who gets to administrate the impact fees and who gets final say. And I know that was a big contentious.
yeah, I don't think anything came of it, that last legislative session. This whenever this changed, it must have been years ago.
Yeah, so it must already been in place.
Yeah.
As it does directly impact like the financial side of things, is there a way just to ensure we're informed? Not necessarily making the decision, but can we put it in there that, you know, the decision is left with whoever's designated in here, but the council will be informed at the next regularly scheduled meeting of a way to be, or something like
That
that?
would certainly be that
I have no problem with that.
yeah.
I just think it'd be good for us to know that we're waiving fees and what developments and that sort of thing and how, and maybe we have to, because it has a direct.
But he's just asking just to get a copy of the information.
Yeah, informational, not that we approve
Yeah,
or
no, no,
anything,
no.
but we're literally like, we waived this development's fee, cause I think we need to know what it was and why it happened, cause it has a direct financial impact to the city.
Right.
Yeah,
That's more.
this, I also thought that it'd be nice to be kept informed.
GL, I just have a
Decision.
question. Sorry. This ordinance is to adjust, not waive. Right?
Correct.
So, I just want to
Because
be
I'm-
clear, they wouldn't be
know.
waiving anything, it's just
Yeah.
to adjust the amount.
But in the event that, could they adjust it to zero, in theory?
I don't see that, but
But there's nothing restricting them from adjusting to zero.
I guess, I mean,
Why don't you do that? Why?
No.
Would
You
you?
have to have a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with you, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand.
because the developer's bringing in residents that are going to impact our
Right.
Jordan River Parkway.
yeah, interesting.
I'm just saying they could.
They could,
in
we're just
theory.
understanding what the role could be.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the boundary there.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to inform the council.
Yeah.
That's what I thought when I read it as well. So
So with that change, I would be comfortable.
Well, and I'm comfortable, I mean, I think Brenda can like hold it down.
Yeah.
For sure. I guess what I worry is if there's a situation that becomes uncomfortable, that, you know, who steps in that point?
Would you step in, GL?
I mean, I'm assuming
when
so.
you say uncomfortable, what do you mean? It's
I mean-
always uncomfortable.
Right, no, I mean,
Is there any-
or wants, yeah, I mean, I guess my concern is like, there's a real, I mean, in terms of with developers, there's this idea that sometimes they get what they want, right?
Sure.
And they could be kind of pushy.
Mhm.
And
Well, we don't
one,
have that.
yeah, and I would hate for that to just fall on Brenda. And that's why I'm saying, like, is it something that, who's the backup? And besides, I mean, I guess attorney's
I would-
office?
The same vein issue, but similar concept is what if Brenda has a conflict of interest?
Sure.
Let's say that the developer's her brother.
Well, with all of them, just so you know, and you know me, this is how I run
I'm
it.
just asking the
You definitely have GL involved, even now we do that. We had that developer who wanted to waive because he was so close. Close, I feel bad, close on the. So we didn't.
Or even if there's, yeah,
So inherently, it says in here, because the director of finance and administration shall have the authority to make such adjustments if the application or person is not satisfied with the decision of the mayor or designee, so that immediately calls him out as the person. You're designating her, but in the event, it could be you. Okay, I follow.
I'm just making sure.
No, I know, yeah, it makes sense to me. Okay.
Because, I mean, reality is we don't know.
Sure.
I come.
If there's-
Right, I mean-
If somebody did.
No, I know. And if there's a conflict, is that something that we can, I mean, that Brenda would be aware of and the mayor would be aware of? Like, if there's a conflict of interest?
That's an approach to their-
Yeah. Is that something that has ever been put into a resolution or into a code change?
So the ethics code that we have.
Okay, just making sure. Yeah.
Do that.
Because you can have it in your procurement department, and
Yeah.
married and issues.
Making sure we.
Yep.
Information. Okay, cool.
Thank you, Jill. And seeing no other comments, we are adjourned and the RDA meeting will be in there in 4 minutes. Goodbye.